Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a fascinating journalistic investigation into an absolute ideological earthquake. We're looking at a secret, illegal meeting where the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party completely fractured. It split into two fierce rival factions and literally set off a chain reaction that shaped the entire course of modern history. If you've ever wondered how a seemingly unified underground movement can just snap in half so dramatically, well, you're definitely in the right place.
Okay, let's dive into this. Picture it. It's August 1903. The setting is the Second Party Congress of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, or RSDLP for short. Now, because political parties are completely outlawed in Tsarist Russia at the time, this meeting has to happen in exile, shifting from Brussels over to London. And what starts as a gathering of revolutionary minds trying to overthrow Tsar Nicholas II, it quickly devolves into a bitter, completely unresolvable schism. From this one single meeting, two distinct paths emerge, and honestly, the 20th century is never the same.
To make sense of this huge shift, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the underground party splits. Then, two visions of revolution. After that, tactics, propaganda, and power. Fourth is the 1917 breaking point. And finally, number 5, the Bolshevik victory. All right, Section 1, the underground party splits. This 1903 divide is really the inciting incident of our whole investigation.
So this 1903 split basically gave birth to two distinct factions. On one side, you've got the Bolsheviks, which comes from the Russian word for majority, and they're led by the highly pragmatic Vladimir Lenin. On the flip side, you have the Mensheviks, meaning minority, led by the much more moderate, cautious Julius Martov. Now, these two guys had actually been close colleagues, but their fundamental disagreement over who exactly should be allowed to join the party and how it should be run caused a permanent rift.
But here's the ironic truth. Taking these names literally is incredibly misleading. Lenin's faction only won that majority vote at the 1903 Congress because a bunch of other delegates had actually walked out in protest right before the vote. In reality, their numbers fluctuated wildly. In fact, by 1910, Leon Trotsky estimated that the Bolsheviks, again the so-called majoritarians, actually made up only about 10% of the wider party.
Moving on to Section 2, Two Visions of Revolution. Let's look at their two very different paths forward.
Now, what's really interesting here is that the core ideological conflict came down to how they interpreted Karl Marx when looking at Russia's semi-feudal society. The Mensheviks believed in a very cautious two-stage revolution. They thought, okay, Russia needs to overthrow the Tsar and establish a capitalist bourgeois democracy first to build up industry and a working class. Only then could they stage a socialist revolution. Lenin and the Bolsheviks? They had absolutely zero patience for that. They argued for an immediate, rolling revolution where the workers seized power right from the jump, totally bypassing that middle bourgeois phase. And this ideological divide directly dictated how they built their organizations. The Mensheviks pushed for an open, inclusive party, a broad coalition of workers acting legally through trade unions. But the Bolsheviks demanded a closed, highly centralized structure. And actually, this moment marks the origins of a massive modern political invention, Lenin's concept of the vanguard party. He literally invented this new model of a secretive, professional political machine. It was a purely pragmatic defense against the Tsar's ruthless secret police, because Lenin believed a loose, open party would just get infiltrated and destroyed instantly. Okay, Section 3, Tactics, Propaganda, and Power. Let's look at how these theories actually played out on the ground in the streets.
Looking at the historical record, it is wild to see how far the Bolsheviks were willing to go. While the Mensheviks were trying to work within existing laws as a sort of revolutionary opposition, Lenin just boycotted state elections altogether and leaned heavily into paramilitary tactics. He even secretly endorsed robbing state banks and post offices because, revolutions are expensive. These ruthless tactics absolutely horrified the Mensheviks, who felt this kind of behavior totally undermined the legitimacy of the socialist cause.
But the war wasn't just fought with paramilitaries, it was fought with ink. The Mensheviks dominated a paper called Iskra, meaning the spark, Lenin countered by heavily backing Pravda, or truth. And the Bolsheviks were brilliant at using modern propaganda techniques. They deliberately kept their messaging super simple for the masses, and Pravda actively encouraged women and minority groups to join up. By infiltrating factory committees with this clear, radical message, the Bolsheviks completely outflanked the Mensheviks' influence in traditional trade unions.
Which brings us to Section 4, the 1917 breaking point. The theoretical debates are about to become a very harsh physical reality.
Over 2.4 million workers, more than 1,000 strikes. Just let that sink in for a second.
In the summer of 1917, the Russian people were completely exhausted by World War I. They were starving, and they were entirely out of patience with the Tsar's empty promises. The sheer scale of unrest boiling over in the cities was staggering. The Mensheviks tried to curb the violence, hoping to work with the middle class, but they vastly underestimated the radicalization of the workers on the ground.
Events start escalating at breakneck speed. March 1917, bread riots force Tsar Nicholas II to abdicate and a provisional government takes over. The Mensheviks support this, thinking, great, this is our long-awaited bourgeoisie revolution. But as the summer brings mass strikes, the Bolsheviks sense a huge opportunity. They bypass the theory and appeal directly to the desperate masses with one potent slogan: bread, peace, and land. They aren't promising revolution years down the line. They're promising it today. And by November 1917, the Bolsheviks violently seize the initiative and form a temporary workers' and peasants' government. As the Bolsheviks moved to seize ultimate control, the Mensheviks realized a civil war was basically inevitable. They walked out of a crucial meeting at the Petrograd Soviet and protest, and as they left, Leon Trotsky delivered this dramatic, defining ultimatum. He said, "You are miserable bankrupts. Your role is played out. Go where you ought to be, into the dustbin of history." It's such a chilling climax to a rivalry that had been brewing for 14 long years.
Finally, Section 5, the Bolshevik victory. Let's talk about how they seized absolute power. Lenin wasted absolutely no time consolidating his power. First, he forms that temporary government in November. Then, when the Bolsheviks only managed to secure about 1/4 of the vote in a nationwide election for a new constituent assembly in January 1918, Lenin's response was brutal and simple. He dissolved the entire assembly by force within days. He renames the party the Communist Party and aggressively neutralizes all political opposition as the country plunges into a devastating civil war against forces trying to reinstate the Tsar.
And this leads us to a truly tragic irony. During that brutal civil war, the Mensheviks actually sided with the Bolsheviks. They viewed Lenin as the lesser of two evils compared to the reactionary royalist armies. But that loyalty didn't save them. Once the Bolsheviks won the war and secured the new Soviet state, they had exactly zero intention of sharing power. By 1921, the remaining Mensheviks were either completely sidelined or driven into permanent exile. I want to leave you with this really provocative question raised by those very exiled Mensheviks, because understanding this helps us grasp the origins of modern political authority itself. Did the revolution actually achieve the fairer, socialist society that the Underground Party originally dreamed of back in 1903? Or did the Bolsheviks' ruthless, centralized tactics simply replace the Tsar with a brand new, highly efficient authoritarian regime? It's a heavy debate that historians continue to unpack to this very day. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, keep analyzing the facts, and I'll see you next time as we dive into another piece of history.